Hello and welcome to a live episode of Deprogrammed on Keri Smith. Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. Welcome. Today is Monday, August 29th. Happy start to your week. If it's your first time here, please consider hitting like and subscribe if you like the content. This is a live show that we do Mondays and Fridays where we just try and talk about what's going on in the world, what's on our minds, hang out, have a little bit of fun. And I'm very excited about my guest today. His name is Epic Mike. You guys may know him as the co-founder of Epicverse, and he's also a frequent guest on Geeks and Gamers. Please welcome Epic Mike. Hello, sir.
Hi there. Thank you for having me. I was very, very, very excited about this. So
I'm really excited to talk to you. You have
yeah,
such a great energy, and I love on Mondays and Fridays. It's all about having a good vibe while talking about what's going on in the world. So I was like,
yeah,
Epic Mike would be good.
I appreciate that. It's good to know I have good vibes. Yeah, because I don't know. Sometimes you don't know how you come across to people because you're like looking at a screen. So yeah, it's nice to know that I'm not off-putting, especially because I yell a lot. So yeah.
I actually haven't seen you yell.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. It's mostly on Mario Kart streams with Geeks and
Okay.
Gamers, but I yell. I'm known for being very loud. So
Epic Mike, how do I get in on a Mario Kart stream?
all you just ask
I,
Jeremy.
I can actually play Mario Kart. That's one of the few
Really?
games. Yes, I used to play it all the time.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
I will talk to Jeremy as
dude.
well because we're always open and Jeremy gets so excited when we have new people play Mario Kart. It's just it's such a terrible environment. Like it's fun, but we're always yelling at each other and screaming and it's always intense, but absolutely. If you want to play it, like I know
I
Jeremy
would be
was
so there. Rainbow Road. That was my
yeah,
favorite course.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How much
that's
fun.
awesome.
Well, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself? For people who may not be familiar with Geeks and Gamers, even or with Epicverse and what you and Josiah are working on,
Yeah.
a little bit about those two things.
Yeah, so I'll start with Geeks and Gamers. So yeah, I've been um around, involved in, or just like even a fan of Geeks and Gamers. Oh, as far back as what was it, 2016? I think it is. Let me see here. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think it was that long
Wow.
ago. So yeah, they were just a Facebook group back then, and that's how I kind of got to introduce to them. Was like, oh, 2013. So it was even far, like back then. Yeah, about
Holy crap,
20.
I didn't know it was around that long.
Yeah, it was a very small Facebook group, and Josiah actually is the reason I got involved with it. And he was like, dude, this is a really cool group of guys, and I think you'd really like the guy that runs it, Jeremy. And back then, it was a very different group than what it is now. But yeah, I started talking and hanging out in there, and then I remember when they started their YouTube channel. I mean, I've kind of seen it grow over time, and then it wasn't until probably I don't know 2020 that I was like, hey, like if you guys need more people or you guys are looking for people to jump on streams and stuff, I'd be happy to do it because I was kind of always like a lurker, never
Yeah.
a participator. So, yeah, that was a fun time. And Jeremy it's great, and he has me on Tuesday night's main event or whatever streams I can be on, helping with gaming or screaming on Mario Kart because that has become my new life now on Sundays. Yeah, um, yeah.
And
So
and so I've interviewed Josiah before. I'm incredibly excited about Epicverse and what you
yeah,
guys are doing. For anyone who hasn't seen that interview, you can go check out the deprogrammed interview I did with Josiah Rises. You guys are sort of, I would compare you to, you're sort of doing what Ripa has done with comics, but you're trying to do that with series and film.
yeah. Yep, absolutely. And it's funny because Ripa kind of like kicked the door in for everybody. And we were like really playing it a lot slower behind the scenes. And then he kind of like kicked the door down. And now everybody like they're all looking at Ripa and then they're like looking like over his shoulder. And me and Josiah are like, oh boy, this is a lot. But yeah, I mean, I've known Josiah since 2012 or something like that. I mean, we've known each other a long time and we I've helped him with a lot of projects and we've always been like creative and sitting down, which coming up with concepts and ideas. And we've tried a couple times to get some things off the ground. I know, when you talked to Josiah, he said that, he had done a feature length film. I helped him a lot with the back end of that, when he was doing post-production on it, and then we had a lot of plans for some other things, and obviously those didn't come to fruition. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I've helped him do that. I watched him start on YouTube, and I remember when we were like screaming because he got like 100 followers for the first time, or
Yeah.
subscribers. We were so excited. So to see where he is now, it's awesome. And then during the pandemic, we were looking to try to do we had some outlets, and we started a YouTube channel, and we were trying to do like funny skits, and we were doing food reviews and all this fun stuff just to kind of give us something to do. And then we were like, dude, movies are the thing, man. We love it. And right now is kind of the right time. I know we'll probably get into that more, but like there was definitely a shift during 2020 across the board, and I think that it kind of shook things enough that there was starting some cracks in some foundations of like some monolithic like companies and standards and like Hollywood and entertainment, and we were like, this might be the chance for us to run with it and pick something up and make something for ourselves. And so we were like, yeah, we should do this epic verse thing. So yeah.
So you guys are focusing mostly on, when it comes to series, you're focusing on fantasy, sci-fi kind of stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, that's our forte. I kind of write a little bit of everything. I know Josiah does too. That's not to say that Josiah doesn't. But like I have, I have drafts for fantasy, sci-fi, dramas, not comedies. I try to stay away from comedies, not because I love comedies, but I'm terrified of comedy, because I've heard that it's very difficult, and bad comedy is like, to me, some of the worst ever. So
What
yeah.
about when it's so bad that it becomes really funny?
Well, that's always a good time, but then you're like, did you do this on purpose? That's always like the thing, I just never want to engage in something like that. To be honest, I have probably more reverence for comedy now than I do for any other genre, just because of what it's doing for culture now versus maybe how it's perceived even like 5 years ago. So
What do
yeah.
you mean by that? Like what it's doing for culture now?
um Boy, I apologize for my rants because I can go off about
Go.
stuff. So, but yeah, like so, I'll use his name a lot, but I'm a huge fan of Dave Chappelle. I have been since, I was. Oh man, when Chappelle Show came out, I think I was 10, and me and my best friend, one of my best friends, he passed away last year, but his mom was a nurse, and so she worked third shift. So I would go to his house after school, and his mom would be leaving, and I would just hang out and keep him company. And then we started watching, like we'd watch South Park and Chappelle Show. We had no business watching these shows at our age, but we did anyways. And we were just floored by how funny it was and everything. But watching Dave go from somebody who was a comedian who was just very passionate about comedy and very talented comedian to becoming, for lack of a better term, like a prophet to like what the industry is becoming. I watched an interview with him when after he got the Mark Twain Award. He was in Washington D.C. and he said that comedy is the last bastion of free speech and we have to protect it. And so I think it's important to witness and to support and to honor like the watchers on the wall that are witnessing what's coming and trying to warn people. And even in some cases, I know, it seems dramatic because it's entertainment. He's not going to war, but he is. He's standing at the door saying like, we can't let this go.
The culture war.
Yeah.
I'll tell you an anecdote about him. So I worked in comedy. I was I managed comedians and produced some series with comedians at the helm, and he was one of the few who I got like always a really good gut feeling from. I
Wow.
only personally interacted with him a couple times. I
Yeah.
didn't saw him interact with some of the younger up and coming comics that I worked with. He was so gracious and kind and helpful, and you just get that like he's actually grounded, like he's
Yeah.
actually a good dude, and
Yeah.
that's not the case with everyone. Maybe most people.
Wow.
So
Yeah. That's
I have
awesome.
a I really admire him too, and I think even looking back years ago, remember when he quit Comedy Central, he
Oh
walked away
yeah.
from $3 million or whatever, with $30
50,
million,
50 million.
$50
Yeah.
million
$50
keeps going.
million. Yeah.
And people that were just this and I was still woke then. I was still in the echo chamber, but I remember even though I was in the echo chamber, I questioned the narrative I was being told. The whole
Yeah.
narrative was like, "He's gone crazy. He's
Wow.
walked
Yeah.
away from all this money."
Yeah, I remember he was like addicted to crack, and he had, yeah, he went to Africa so he could do drugs, like, and all. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's funny because after he did that, I mean, obviously YouTube wasn't super prevalent. As soon as YouTube was something that like I started using regularly, I would look for stuff from him all the time. I was always looking for him, and I remember, I mean, I followed him a lot because I just was a huge fan. But I remember I watched a comedy special that he did. Well, it wasn't a special; it was a comedy bit. He was in the UK, and there was like an open mic night at this very small bar. And I remember why it's on YouTube still. He walked in, and the guy that was doing his set was like, "Oh my gosh, it's Dave Chappelle." He just sat down, gave him Dave the mic, and Dave talked for like 3.5 hours. He kept saying he needed to leave. He kept saying he was hungry, needed to go get food, but he wouldn't leave, and he just kept talking and sharing himself. And it was like, to me, I've always loved comedy. I love laughing. I can appreciate how a comedian can spin a narrative, but watching a guy who uses laughter to disarm people so he can like inject truth into their lives, and then watching him just talk about stuff. He talked about something that that he's never cheated on his wife,
Mm.
ever. I mean, that's like a huge thing. You talked about the fact that he's like, he could go anywhere back when he was in the industry and get coke and prostitutes and anything he wanted, but none of that was important to him. He talked about
Yeah.
being a devout Muslim and how that was really, his religion was very important to him and stuff. So watching him be like so vulnerable with people, I was like, this is like what comedy should be. And then when he came back, that's kind of how he was doing comedy. He was like, it's like very like stream of consciousness, but interjected with these jokes that were still very Dave Chappelle. I
Mhm.
had appreciation for it, and it kind of changed the way I saw comedy. And then watching, Joe Rogan and all of his people and people that he recommended, and
Mhm.
going back and watching older comedians and listening to them and how they, Richard Pryor and even like Lenny Bruce, and watching how very subtly and quietly these guys were telling jokes, but they were actually battling um, for free speech in a way that I think no politician ever could. You know?
Well, yeah, because I agree with you because culture, everybody's heard that Andrew Breitbart quote by now that politics is downstream from culture.
Yeah,
And I think that's true. I think it follows wherever the culture goes. And so it's much more important to, I think, be a culture changer rather than
yeah,
a politician.
yeah.
And there are people who, oh man, I haven't had enough coffee. I'm losing my train of thought. It was something
Oh,
about culture changers. Damn it.
oh no, I'm sorry.
No, no, it'll come back to me. Let me ask you this question and then it'll come back to me.
Yeah,
Trinoculus P, thank you for the super chat. $5 says, question for Mike. What's harder to write, a popular comedy or a popular Christian movie?
that's a really good question. So like there's two parts. I wish I could just answer a question straightforward and it'd be simple. I think popular comedy is easier to write, but I think timeless comedies are harder to write than that. I think if you want popular comedies, you can look at the ridiculousness of society. You could put a movie out that fits that genre, but there's a lot of comedy that's come out in the last 10 years that does not age well and doesn't still stand the test of time. I think writing a timeless comedy is really difficult. Um Popular Christian movies are easy to write because this may be unpopular because I know I'm a Christian, and I love my faith. I love my religion, but I don't like how it manipulates its audience. It's
Mhm.
very easy to write a popular Christian movie because literally all I have to do is write a movie about like a pastor that's struggling to make ends meet because the government is trying to take his church away, and I could literally sell that movie and make millions and millions of dollars. I think people forget like the Christian movie industry is very very lucrative with very little effort put into it. You know?
You know what? I agree with you actually. So, and
Yeah.
I'm a Christian. I think it's I think it's sort of when you make it your primary goal, like your message. whether
Yeah.
that's Christianity or woke
Yeah.
or Islam, whatever it is, your ideology, your belief system. I think when you make it your primary message in art and or your primary goal in art, then you're necessarily putting the entertainment value down here. Your
Yeah.
one has to be at the top. And in a sort of view, like your beliefs are going to come through anyway in everything that you do. So why not
Yeah.
put the entertainment first? Because everything that you do, the way that you see and interpret the world is affected by your belief system. So it's like if you make a movie, Epic Mike, it doesn't have you don't have to it doesn't have to be like, oh, this is a Christian movie. It's just like
Yeah.
obviously your values, your perspective, your everything is imbued with your way of looking at the world. It's just naturally
Absolutely.
there.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah. I remembered my lost thought,
Oh, there we
which
go.
is kind of like,
Awesome.
so we were talking about culture makers. There's this documentary, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it was about the FBI and Martin Luther King Jr.
Hmm.
And I watched it on a plane. And while watching it, it struck me that the reason they were so interested in spying on him and the reason why they were spying on people like John Lennon
Yeah.
was because they were culture changers.
Yeah.
You know, Martin Luther King Jr., I think we tend to think of him and put him in the political box. And yes, he had a big impact on politics, but he really had a bigger impact on culture. He was a culture
Yes.
changer. That's why they were so like, this guy's got too much influence. It's a cultural influence, don't you think?
100%. Oh, absolutely. I actually, because we're in a day and age now where like deconstructing your heroes is like the new narrative. So like people try to bring up less pretty parts of like Martin Luther King's past, and like that there may have been situations where he was maybe not faithful to his wife, and there was some things like there's
Oh, there were.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. I'm trying to be sensitive, about it, but like the
Yeah.
fact that that's come out. But then the when I was growing up, the way it was always taught to us was Martin Luther King was the hero and Malcolm X was kind of the villain,
Mm.
and that was how that kind of worked. He was the extremist and Martin Luther King was this like Christian hero that was like kind of to be you know um held on a pedestal, and stuff like that. And I think that um you can still appreciate the work that somebody's done. They don't have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. That's kind of why the Bible kind of tells us that, like, stop
Mhm.
looking at people to be perfect for you, because they won't be. That's okay, because we have the perfect standard. But when you look at like Malcolm X, I've done a lot more reading about him recently, and one of the things that I saw is that they actually had the same level of FBI surveillance on him, and his FBI agent actually, when he finally like stopped doing what he said, his report said that he was a man that was a man of like, I wish I remembered the exact quote, but basically he was like a man of character. He said he was seldom late for meetings, let alone he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he was faithful to his wife,
Right.
he was good to his kid. They were like everything about him, he was above like reproach in many
He
ways.
lived his principles. He actually
Yes,
he tried to
absolutely.
behave the way he spoke.
Absolutely. And that's having been a criminal when he was younger, and he admitted to that, And I think that that's both sides of the thing is like, yeah, they were affecting culture, and they realized talking to people is going to be the thing that changes things, not yelling at politicians. But the more influence they had, in culture, the more influence they would start to have in politics. And there's a lot of talk about the fact that him and Martin and Malcolm never really met. They met like one time, very briefly, but they had a lot of talks about getting together, and they um started seeing each other's perspectives, and they started empathizing with the way the other one was looking at the world. And there was a lot of thought that the reason that they were assassinated when they was because they were actually going to start pushing politics harder than they had been. There was
Mm.
talk about maybe him starting to run for office or starting to look into that, and that's more terrifying than anything, is a politician that has a grasp on culture.
On
So
culture. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I've heard the same thing about, Malcolm X and Cameron Pasha, who's on my show quite
Yes, I
frequently.
love.
He's a
Yeah,
huge
he's
fan
awesome.
of Malcolm X, and he said they called him the FBI called him a monk. They were like, "He's practically a monk compared to
Yeah,
MLK."
Yeah, which is funny because one is the hero, one is not. But if
Yeah.
if you really wanted to like put a guy on a pedestal, it's the guy that didn't do anything like actually personally wrong. But they're both. It doesn't detract from the work that they did.
Mhm.
But that's today's day and age. That's the attitude is if we can tear down their character, does their work still stand? And it can, but it doesn't. They don't. People don't want it to. It's
Yeah.
almost like trial by public opinion or whatever. So yeah, absolutely.
So I want to learn a little bit more about you and
Oh boy.
what and what is it about? We were talking just briefly before we started about having like imposter syndrome, about sharing our opinions online and stuff like that. What is it that compels you to put yourself out there?
um the less glamorous version of it is I was talking to my wife one day. I was ranting about something. I was going off about something, and I was like looking at her and I was like, I got to find a platform to talk about this stuff so that I don't have to keep torturing you listening to my
Yeah.
rants. I was like, I just got to find somewhere else to talk about this stuff. And it was like, it wasn't like I don't want to talk to you anymore about this. It was just, I was like looking at her and she was listening to me go off about something she's heard probably a million times before. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had to find a platform for this because
Yeah.
you poor thing, you've been so patient and I'm still going off. That was always part of it. I'll reference my wife a lot. She'll be embarrassed that I did, but that's okay. Years ago, before YouTube, any of this stuff, I owned a business delivering firewood, and I was cutting wood, and I got really, 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 really big into conspiracy theories, like really deep. I mean, it's like all
Like
kinds of like
actual conspiracy theories or conspiracy theories that are
both,
true? Okay.
both, like ones that were true that I was like, oh my gosh, and then ones that weren't so true that like now when I look at them, like goodness, I really got way out there in the weeds at night. It was a mix of both because I think it's funny thing is when you start like wading through conspiracies, you'll find a lot of like evidence of things that are real thrown into the muck of things that are
Mhm.
just ridiculous.
Yes.
Yeah, it might be ridiculous to think that like half of Hollywood have been cloned and replaced with lizard people, but you might find that like maybe some of like the way that they treat actors and actresses and talent isn't maybe on the up and up about certain so like you find truth in that. But it was a very profound moment in my life because I was going off about some conspiracy theory and I was like, this is crazy, blah 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 blah, and my wife just like sitting there, she looks at me and she goes, so what are you going to do about it?
Uh,
And I was like, what do you mean? What am I going to do about it? I was incensed. I was like, how dare you? Like, she's like, what are you going to do about it? Because if you're not going to do anything about it, why are you getting so upset? And
Mhm.
I was like, oh, that's actually a really good point. I'm like, well, I'm not going to do anything about it. And she's like, then why are you getting so worked up about it? Like, if it doesn't call you to action, then is it really worth getting upset? And it just blew my mind, and it's why I married her. But it just changed the way I looked at things. So then it was like, okay, if I'm ranting about this stuff and I'm not acting on it, I'm not trying to talk to people about it, I'm not trying to inform people about it, then what am I doing? Like what's
Mhm.
the point? And so I just realized I had to do something sooner rather than later. And I realized the more people that I can connect to around me, whether it's, you and other YouTubers and other people that are influencing or just an audience, then I can help elevate other people that are capable of doing things or don't know that they can do something about it. I want to be able to give people the same level of like hope and also like red pilling that I got of like, what are you going to do about it? Because if I could influence one person to get up and do something about something that they see that's an injustice in the world, then like that at the end of the day, like awesome, like we did
That's
something.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
There's
That's a
there
big part of
I
it.
hear stories all the time from people in the Deprogrammed chat who are working on things and have been inspired by things that are not even like one there's a book that Mystery Chris recommended, State of Fear, Michael Crichton.
Okay,
And
I'm gonna be
we
taking
read an
notes.
essay from it, but I haven't read the book yet, but we've been promoting it. And someone in the chat recently was like, "Oh, because my husband's playing in the Netherlands," and this person's like, "Oh, I hope I get to meet you there. I've been reading State of Fear, and also I used to be trans. I've detransitioned, and I'm
Wow.
creating a program for like a kind of a program for people who are in that movement and considering detransitions. Like, that's
Wow.
incredible. Like,
Yeah,
you just by speaking your opinions, you and telling people about stuff, like, who knows what that's going to spark in them. That's like, I don't know. That's the most exciting.
absolutely.
So
I
I hear
love
what you're
it.
saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a big thing. I've been a Christian. Like, I was raised in the church, and um started very early. I mean, and went to um I think a big church that was really kind of on its way towards something really big. The church I went to was a very big church, and there was a lot of influence that they had early on, that like there are names that are in like the Christian industry that run mega churches, all kinds of stuff that were very small back then, that my pastor actually like mentored. And like some people that like he actually influenced early on in their careers, that are like have very big platforms now, that people would be surprised about and stuff. But it was a big thing. I was too young at the time to realize how big of a thing it was. But one day our pastor announced that he was divorcing his wife, and that he was marrying this other woman that he had been having an affair with for a little while. And then, yeah, it was,
Wow.
yeah, they went from this very big church that had, it had a school in it for kids, like an actual school system in it that they had set up so they could teach kids and train kids in a Christian place, and all these business endeavors, to like in the basement of renting the basement of like this office building that had a leaky roof. I mean, it just completely destroyed the whole thing. But as I got older, I really, something happened, and I just started questioning a lot of why I believed what I believed. And it wasn't like do I really believe any of this? Jesus has always been the center. I know to I don't have to question Jesus, but
Hmm.
the things around him, and some of the
Hmm.
things we attach to our faith, and some of the things we
Yes.
attach to, we have a lot of mantras in the church that I'm like, is that really true? And it's okay to
Mhm.
it was like the
It
Lord,
should be
like,
okay to ask. Yeah.
yes. And people were like, well, that's how we've always done it. Of course it's true. Or why would we do anything different? Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, but is it really true? And then when I started asking those questions, it kind of blew my world apart, because
Mm.
I just didn't realize how okay it was to ask questions, and actually how enriched my faith became, because I started looking deeper into things. Like it says, like in the Bible, like it's to the glory of God to hide a matter, and it's glory of kings to seek it out. And like, so I just like, the more I dug, I was like, if I dig deep and find that what I've been believing isn't true, then it would be better for me to find that out
Mhm.
than to live a lie my whole life. So then that started becoming a big part of it too. And that's also part of what I do. Cause like I like to do is, I was like, well, being a Christian, like, I mean, I do not have a very clean mouth, as far as how I talk about things. And, I can be loud and forward and all that stuff. And I realized that that is not becoming of like Christian,
Mhm.
the way I was raised. But I also go like, I'd rather talk about my faith and be honest about who I am. And if I transform and grow over time, then people can see that. And then I have like, actual evidence to people that like growth and change in Christ is like a good thing, instead of pretending to be pure. And then somebody catches me swearing on the street and go, wow, that guy isn't anything of what he says he is. I just don't ever
I
want that. Go ahead.
I hear you. I
Yeah.
actually, well, my friend gave me a what do you call it? A car scent freshener that says, "I love Jesus, but I cuss a little." And I'll probably piss people off with this, but I don't really care very much about cursing,
Yeah.
about like certain like, well, these words are bad and these words are good. And why? Because colloquially we've decided that this one means this. Well, word etymology changes, words change anyway, first of all.
Yeah.
And secondly, a lot of times when people point to those verses about taking the Lord's name in vain, I think that I think that verse is about something so much more important and meaningful than
Yeah.
saying, OMG. I think it's about putting God's name on things that are not of God. Like, that's really taking God's name in vain. And
Yeah.
so, um, but I understand. I know, and I'm friends with people who feel differently and are
Yeah.
like very, make sure they never say any words that we've called like bad words.
Yeah.
But and maybe I'll change. I'm like you. I'm kind of open. I'm like, maybe one day I'll look back at this and be like, oh, Keri, you had so much to learn. Like it was so, but I also think using curse words sparingly is important too, because otherwise they just become a crutch for language when you can't think of
Yeah,
a better word. A lot of
I'm
people
guilty of
overuse
that.
them.
Yeah,
What? Do you
I'm
do
guilty
that?
of that. Yeah, I do it a lot, but part of the reason I don't know, part of the reason I do it, there's a method to the madness, even though it's a lot of chaos too. I just found that like once I took the reins off, there was a lot bottled up, and so now I'm just
Mm,
trying to get it all out because sometimes I'm screaming and swearing and stuff like that, and I realize I'm like, there's no need for all of this language. I
yeah.
like, yeah, sometimes like when I can look back on myself, like I can watch myself over my shoulder when I'm on the internet and screaming at people on Mario Kart and realize this is ridiculous. It doesn't serve any purpose. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but like, would I rather do this or once again pretend that that's not how I feel at the moment, you know?
Yeah.
And so there, yeah, but I absolutely agree. I think there's a way, you know, language has an impact, and I think, you know, if you know somebody that you know is like calm and collected drops an f-bomb because they're upset, there's a little bit more weight to it than
Oh,
like,
exactly.
yeah.
Oh, you should see. I mean, it's like sarcasm. I feel like it should be used sparingly and when it's the best tool. And if you use it sparingly, like I'll tell you, I probably curse more in my daily life than I do online and certainly than I do on camera.
Hmm.
Um, but if I do on Twitter, I didn't realize it, but once I said one time I used I can't even remember. I might have used the F word. And there were people who were saying, "Oh my she used the F word. This is really important." Like
Yeah, absolutely. That's
like,
funny.
okay, they paid
Yeah,
attention. I'm like, "Well, you should hear me in my real life." Like, we use it a little more than that, my husband and I, but, you
that's
know.
funny.
He
Yeah.
has rules. Do you have rules about elders? Like, he grew up Catholic, and I don't know if that influenced his what he was taught as a kid, but he is he's really careful not to ever use curse words in front of his mother because he views it as
Oh
a
wow.
sign of disrespect to an elder to do that. And he
Yeah,
doesn't like it if friends or family use those words in front of his mom either.
that's understandable. So yeah, there's a balance because I do have gears. Like I'm not like just plowing down a hill at 100 miles an hour. I mean, like I don't swear in front of my kids. I don't swear in front of other people's kids. Occasionally, maybe something will slip out if like something's happening. Like you know, I've been like something one. I mean, I've probably said the D word in front of my kids before. I'm like, damn, what are we doing? And then the kids are like, oh, and I'm like, that's sorry. But like, yeah, I don't. My mother doesn't like my language. She
Mhm.
won't watch some of my streams because I'm like,
Okay.
Mom, it's bad. And she's like, I'm aware. But yeah, I try not to swear a lot in front of my mom unless I'm, you know, we're talking about something intense or something. Sometimes things will come out and stuff. But yeah, I agree. There's etiquette. I'm not an anarchist to etiquette. I think etiquette is important. I was raised to be respectful, you know, Mr., Mrs., you know, things like that. And as I'm growing into an adult, I'm learning that some of those dynamics are shifting because
Mhm.
like it's weird when you call somebody that's like 2 years older than you. Like if I was calling you Miss Keri Smith, how are you today? You're like, please don't. Why are you calling me Mrs.? Like, you know,
Yeah.
but just wanting to be respectful of that. Yeah, and I have and this is something I've learned a lot more recently, but I do have a lot of respect for the fact that like, you know, somebody that's older than me and even some, you know, especially elders, like older generations, you know, and stuff. I have a lot of respect for the fact that they have experiences that I didn't, you know.
Mm.
One of my something that was very enriching to me, my grandmother, she lived to be, I think it was 93. And before she passed, like, you know, kind of the last like 5 or 6 years of her life, I just kind of started asking her about things she remembered from her childhood and things. And she would tell me about politics. And because she remembers Richard Nixon was her favorite. She's like, oh, I remember Richard. We used to call him Tricky Dick. He was always, we just never really knew if he was really trustworthy or not, you know. But hearing her talk about how things were then till now, you know, there's a lot of wisdom there. And there's a lot of wisdom from the older generations that can influence how we go about dealing with newer things too. So no, there's definitely a balance and to everything, and etiquette is really important. I think that sometimes has become a lost art because the whole thing of like boomers and calling out boomers all the time. I'm like, well, you wouldn't really have a platform to call somebody a boomer if it wasn't for those
Right.
boomers, you know. I mean, we build, we build upon each other. Society got here because of the work somebody did 200 years ago, whether or not you agree with how they did it. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the work they did, So
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Can we talk about fatherhood for a second?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, first of all, how did you decide to have kids? Did you always know you'd have kids? Did you put a lot of thought into it?
No, not at all. No, me and my wife got married. We've been married. We just had our 11-year anniversary 2 days ago. So
Congratulations.
thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, we got
That's
married. Go ahead.
oh, that's a good long time. I like it.
Yeah. We got married and we talked about it and we're like, we don't really want to have kids. We're not really kids people, and maybe we'll wait about like 5 years and we can revisit this. And then 5 months later, my wife is like, I'm pregnant, and I was like, cool. We did not plan for this at all, because we got married for love, not because we were ready. We were just like, we're crazy about each other, and we're just gonna hitch our wagons together and figure it out as we go. And then we had my daughter when we were 22. We got married at 21. We had our daughter when we were 22, and we were not ready. We had just moved into a new apartment. I had just lost my old job and had just started a brand new one, like the same week she was due. We had moved in the apartment the week my wife was due. So we had boxes everywhere when my daughter came. It was a mess. Like, we were not ready at all. And that was and the same happened 2 years later. We were like, yeah, probably one is enough for us. And then about 2 years later, my wife was like, pregnant again. And I'm like, cool. Well, we had 2 years, like, we'll figure it out. Yeah. So and then we actually have a third one on the way due in December, and that was a 7-year gap. So
Wow.
yeah.
So how do you navigate parenting in this? I mean, I don't want to call it a dystopia, but there's a lot of dystopian elements to the
Yeah.
culture that we live in now, and there are a
Yep.
lot of people concerned for good reason
Yeah.
about raising kids in this cultural environment where it's suddenly like, transgenderism is being pushed on children.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ideologies being pushed on kids in public schools. Like, how do you approach parenting?
Yeah. So I'm not a perfect parent. I don't think I could write a book and win any awards for parenting, that's for sure. But one of the things I learned, and I'm still trying to figure that out, but one of the things I learned is, like, I was raised by a single mother, so I didn't really have a dad to give me any kind of insight. My grandfather passed when I was 3, and I still remember a lot about him from that young of an age, but like, I didn't really have any like male figures in my life growing up at all. So getting married, having a kid, I'm like, I don't have any context for what it means to be a dad, except, and this is why I find it important. And I'll try not to get emotional, but my kids get me emotional all the time. Like, the beautiful thing about religion, specifically Christianity, is God relates to us as a father. And so there's a ton of examples about how he operates and functions with us that gives us an indicator of how we're supposed to function with children. And so I do a lot of listening and reading about how I should operate with my children. Like, there was a lot of thought put into their names, and what they were going to be like. I listened to my wife's intuition about how she felt our kids would be. She's very right about that, how they turned out and stuff. So there's a lot of that. And one of the things I struggle with a lot is tradition. I don't really have any like major traditions in my life. Like, we kind of just do things how we do them. Like Thanksgiving, we're like, do we want to do turkey and stuff this year? Or do we want to do pizza? Because that sounds way better. Like, I'd rather eat pizza and mashed potatoes than like go make a turkey and do stuff. I mean, so there's a lot of that in our lives too, is like learning how to give our kids something that is figuring out what's worth it and what's not for structure in their lives, like, because I think tradition is important when it benefits them growing as people. But I also think that it can be stifling to tell them this is the way we do things because that's the way it should be done, instead of showing like, hey, there's different ways to approach situations in life and stuff. So I say all that to say it's been very unorthodox. But the biggest thing for me is that my kids know who Jesus is, and they
Mm.
know that that their parents love them. And then as we kind of like engage in new things that come into our lives, I mean, like, you know, there's a lot of people that recommend having a talk with their kids at like 6 because they might hear it from school by that time. So there's a lot of talking to our kids and saying, hey, listen, the floor is always open to have conversations. If you have questions, questions are good. You should be asking questions, but you should never be letting anybody tell you how to do things or tell you how the world works. We can do that for you. That's how it should be. Parents should be the one that tell their children how the world works around them and how to
Mm.
function in that world. And it should not be teachers and educators that are doing that. I think the whole thing of it takes a village to raise a family or, raise a child, I think makes sense in the context of like, there's lessons that you can learn from your grandparents that you couldn't learn from your parents.
Mhm.
But my mother should not be raising my kids. I should be
Right.
raising my kids.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to like, transgenderism and stuff, we talk about, we had to talk with our daughter about, there, in society today, there are women that love other women, and they sometimes get married to those other women, and there are men that do that too and stuff. But the thing is, if you have questions about that, you come talk to us. They don't, like, the school shouldn't be teaching you that. Fortunately, our schools, the school that we're in right now, my kids are in right now, is a little bit more conservative. I wouldn't say that they push conservative values, but the superintendent definitely um, has a pretty good handle on the world, and they stay pretty unbiased. So we're fortunate with that. But yeah,
Is it funny? Isn't it funny that things have moved so far towards like leftist indoctrination that now if they're unbiased, we describe them as conservative?
yes. Oh yeah.
But they're conservative. What does that mean? They don't push anything, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah, they don't do it. Yeah. It's funny. That's really funny, but it's true. I mean, moderates have become the conservatives of the day now. I mean,
Mm.
in a way, because of how extreme everything is. And it's the problem with extremes. Extremes breed more extremes. I think that there's like there's a middle ground to everything, and what really is, I think, happening to society is not. It is that the left is pushing in, but it also will breed more more extremism on the right too.
To
You know,
balance it,
it's a
because
balance.
it's a
Yeah.
it's a struggle to move that window back, and so then there'll be, sort of a polar opposite kind of
Yes.
growing contingent, and I completely agree. It's that,
Yeah.
for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It just depends on when it happens, and
Yes.
but
And
but I
I
agree with
think
you.
that absolutely. And I post about it a lot. I talk about it a lot, the breaking the pendulum, because I can't think of anything more terrifying and also more heartbreaking than to see the culture shift back the complete opposite. Because I know a lot of people are like, well, we need conservative values and stuff. And I'm like, I don't disagree. I don't disagree that, but what I don't want to see happen is a politician's interpretation of what conservative values should look like, and then um, watching policy dictate how people should live their life based on conservative values. That's just as
Mm.
dangerous. It's just as
Yeah,
dangerous to say that you can't talk about this subject because it might offend somebody as it is to say you can't talk about this subject because I don't like it or it
yeah.
offends my values. It's like, there should never have been a situation where on the books it was illegal for two men to do what they want to do behind closed doors, but there was. It was
Right.
illegal at one point. And the thing is, we didn't get here because that's the natural way like society progresses. We got here because at some point somebody said, I don't like the way that culture is telling me to do something, and I want it to change. So it's just
Be the opposite.
and be the
The
opposite,
exact opposite. Yeah.
absolutely. And there should be balance. And that's why I talk a lot about breaking the pendulum, because I would rather not see it swing back the other way. I'd rather see us move towards a much more freedom oriented thing. Like it's that thing about like what I'll use a lot of Bible scriptures because you actually understand. Like Paul says, like everything is permissible, not everything is edifying. And I
Mhm.
think there's a difference between everything can be like everything is okay, but not everything is good for you. Like, you shouldn't smoke crack. That doesn't mean I'm going to make it so you can't smoke crack. I would just rather you didn't. But in order to get the point where people aren't smoking crack, you have to engage with them and show them the benefit of not doing so. And I kind of have the same attitude with like my kids and stuff. You know, now I'm protective of my kids. I don't let them just go and run around and do whatever. I don't let them just go to people's houses that I don't know. I don't let, you know, because that's just as dangerous. You know, the freewheeling parenting is just as bad. But, you know, being able to say like, hey, if you want to try this or do this, like as far as like watching them, you know, like my daughter, like we recently started watching the Harry Potter films and stuff. I grew up and Harry Potter was like the worst thing in the whole world, and it was like completely off the table. And then I grew up and watched the Harry Potter movies, and like, I don't know why everybody was freaking out about these films, but I let my daughter like recently watch the first couple movies because she was like, I'm curious and I want to see. And I'm like, you know what? I'd rather you try to like learn about something or read a book and me be able to engage with you and show you, you know, like, okay, this is why dad says like, this is not good for you, or this is why we talk about not doing this thing, you know, or, you know, so, you know, we set up rules, and sometimes rules are like, okay, you can do this thing in this context, and if you break those rules, then we get to explain to you why that's the case and why we don't break those rules and stuff, versus saying this is the way we do things, and if you deviate from that, you'll be punished, you know. And I think that that's the dangerous mindset that we could get back into, is we don't do these things, and if you do, you'll be punished. But also it should not be, let me protect you from, let me make everything okay and then protect you from having any kind of consequences from something not being okay. Like, if you get addicted to drugs because we said everybody should be able to smoke crack, well, like the thing is that'll destroy your life. So, but if I don't want you to have any societal repercussions of that, then what'll happen is I'll pass legislation saying, well, if you tell a crackhead what they're doing is not good, then like you'll be thrown in jail. And also we're going to give your tax money to that crackhead to like live their life as comfortably as possible. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just that constant thing of like, it should, yeah.
It's about what are we imparting on a societal level? Like, what lessons are we imparting? I imagine if I were a parent, I would be constantly relating it back to what lessons I'm imparting as a parent. But I think we're doing that right now. There's a lot of debate and disagreement over Biden's student loan forgiveness. And I'm not sure what your opinions are on it, but I was talking with someone about it this morning online, and I was like, no, I'm not criticizing the people who are cashing the checks. Like, if you're a person who gets, the government sends you a check for your student loan that's like, here, have this forgiveness, I'm not blaming you, and you should cash that check. The government sent you a check. Like, I would cash it. I'm criticizing the policy itself. I'm criticizing the people who support the policy, because I think that what it does is it sets up an incentive. It sets up psychologically, it sets up this mindset that other people are responsible, should be responsible, and that's morally good and okay for other taxpayers to pay for your choices.
Yes. I think I think it's funny because, you know, to say like, well, we're going to forgive X amount of student loan debt. And you're like, okay, you know, and, you know, some of the people were like, okay, well, what about people that already paid for, you know, school out of their own pocket and got there, and are we going to get that money back in that conversation? And I think that sometimes we miss the forest for the trees, because the reality is the same guy that just signed into law student loan debt forgiveness also helped sign into law the thing that made it so you couldn't declare bankruptcy against student debt. So why is he then now saying that? Didn't go back and reverse a policy that he helped create years ago. You know, like, that's the thing. The system, if the system is broken, and then the system offers you the same thing that created the broken system offers you this, like, an answer, it's probably not an answer.
No, it's not. That's why I criticize it too. Is it's just part of the same cycle of failure.
Yes,
because it's just going to get us into a worse place economically.
100%, because the answer, you know, I actually just read something about this. Washington Post, of all places, was like, yeah, it's actually really bad, because like in India, they did something very similar for low income, like farmers and stuff. They're like, yeah, we'll forgive your student loan and forgive different your debts and stuff like that. And what ended up becoming is every politician then had to say, every politician was questioned on, well, what are you doing about debt? What are you doing about student loan debt? Are you helping us with that? Because if you're not, then we'll probably vote for the other guy. Which now then you start to see the insipid manipulation of politics. Because if and listen, regardless of how
About
anybody feels about
buying
anybody,
votes.
yeah, like if Trump absolutely wanted to push those last like stimulus checks, because it would have looked great for him when he was getting reelected. He pushed really hard for those at the very end. He's like, these people need this money. And and that's not to say that he didn't have an altruistic desire to help people. But the thing is, he was still giving government money, which is all funded by taxpayers,
I agree.
to people. But that was the case, because what did the other side do? As soon as he was out of office, Biden was like, hey, you guys are getting these stimulus checks. Congratulations. I'm awesome because I gave you free money. It's just how they work, So now it'll be what are you going to do about stimulus, and what are you going to do about this, and what are you going to do about that and stuff? And then we start to miss out on the reality, which is, okay, well, why did you even create the system to be that broken in the first place? Maybe you should go back and fix that. But nobody that they're not gonna talk about that. No. I mean, that's they're gonna jump on, how is this a good thing for Democrats? And why don't Republicans want it? Basically, I saw that a lot. It's like, Republicans don't want you to have student loan debt forgiveness. And it's like, that's not what is being said.
Actually, the left was criticizing it too, big time.
Yeah.
They were like, it's not enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were pointing out that it's going to benefit. I'm not saying wholly. I'm saying on average, it's going to benefit more of people who are able to go to these elite colleges and not so much the working class. They were saying some of the same things I saw libertarians and conservatives saying, which is, so wait a minute, you've got people who went to trade schools, didn't take out loans, like plumbers, truckers, and people who are going to be paying off the student loan debt of people who went for like gender studies. Like, what is that? Yeah. And so we're living in interesting times, like,
absolutely.
sure.
I mean, and yeah, it's all about sensationalism. And here's the thing that I think is really important to note too, that I think the left doesn't want to talk about it, and I think sometimes the right forgets. And this is not indicative of anybody watching or you or anything. I think it's just as a whole. Trump didn't get elected because of his values. Trump got elected because he resonated with people, with culture, when he said to them, I'm here to help you. He said, I'm here to drain the swamp. He goes, he said in his speech, and it's funny because he gave his last speech here in Michigan, not I won't say exactly where I live, but in a place that I grew up. Like, I was born in the place where he gave his last speech. And he said to people, he goes, I didn't even want to run for office, but I felt I had to protect you. Because they're not coming they're coming for me. And if I'm not here, then they're going to come for you next. Like, those kind of words are not the words of somebody that's a politician. There was no like, oh, I'm going to make sure that, everybody has a turkey on the table and everybody has milk in the fridge. He was like, listen, I'm trying to protect you because this thing doesn't work and it's going to get worse for everybody. And then Biden's attitude was like, well, we don't like that guy, so we got to stop him from getting elected. Very different, And so I think the left sometimes forgets that weaponizing and demonizing the right is going to fail if the right if the people that are on the right are running, going, hey, like, the reason people like me is because I actually am telling people making people feel like they're important. That's the thing. Trump made people feel like they're important. He would call people out in the crowd and look at them, and like there was a thing, regardless of how I feel about his politics or anything, but like there was like, I remember the difference. There was a moment, and they tried to make fun of him about it, where he was walking on the tarmac and the soldier's hat blew off, and he ran over and grabbed the hat, tried to put it back on his head, and it blew off again, and he went back and grabbed it again for the guy and gave it to him, and then saluted the guy and walked onto his plane. And then somebody showed Um, Later, there was kind of a similar situation with Biden, and he didn't even notice. But I think it's indicative of why people resonated with Trump, why the military resonated with Trump. Things that people don't really want to talk about. The people that are actually like supposed to be protecting us, and the people that actually have like the ability to like enforce things, are the ones that really like Trump. And like the left, I think, doesn't understand why people resonated with Trump so strongly. And I
Yeah.
think the right is walking away with the wrong attitudes about why people resonated with Trump so strongly. And I think that there's a lesson to be learned about how politics should actually function, and how it should be relating to people and not to policies.
Yeah. You're
Yeah,
making me think of an anecdote I heard. I used to work in a friend's boot shop in Austin, and one of my coworkers said that during the 2016 primary season, that this liberal, maybe even leftist, I don't know, but this liberal journalist had come in to buy a pair of boots and was talking about how they had just covered something with all the candidates and was sharing their opinions on the candidates. Now, this is coming from someone on the left, and they said that their gut reactions to the candidates were, regardless of what politically they were aligned with Clinton, with Hillary, but they
yeah,
said Clinton came off like a total B word,
yeah,
very cold.
yeah,
Couldn't care less, like looks down at you. They
yeah,
said Ted Cruz was just really smart and almost somewhat hard to relate to because he was just purely functioning on this intellectual level of
yeah,
wanting to talk facts and politics,
yep.
and that Donald Trump made him feel seen.
And who's going to get elected? The guy that made you feel seen. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that that's something that people forget a lot about. That it's what's missing in politics is politics, and to a very similar degree, even like Hollywood and entertainment industry, is like the modern aristocracy. And there's been such a disconnect between fans and the people, the creators, and politicians and their electors, like that. When somebody made them feel seen, they scrambled around them. They were willing.
Mhm.
There's like a it's literally in a book. It's in the book The Prince, written by Machiavelli. He says it's better to be feared than loved. And a lot of people read that and go, okay, cool. So I probably should just be feared then. But what he said is, because love can be fickle and people will turn on you. But if you're loved, if you're feared, people will do exactly what you ask of them and nothing more. But if you're loved, people will risk their lives for you. Like, people will
Mhm.
do anything they can for you because they love you. And you hear a lot of talk about loving Trump, not a lot of talk about loving Biden. People go, well, he's not perfect, but he's better than Trump. And I'm like, yeah, but the people that supported Trump loved that guy.
Mhm.
They'll do anything for him. They'll literally risk life and limb, regardless of what actually happened on January 6th. If it was actual gunfire and actual violence, people would have still went there. Like, that's the thing. They
Mhm.
were willing to risk their lives for him, even if it just meant walking to the Capitol, knowing that that might not go well for somebody. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, regardless of what actually, like I said, I'm not commenting on what actually happened there, um,
Right.
because
Right.
that could be a whole nother thing.
But you're
But
talking about that feeling that people had for him, people on
yes,
the Trump train, that, and I think you're right. I think he did
yeah,
make people feel seen. I'm still, all these years later, trying to figure out, like, what was that whole phenomenon about? And it's interesting for me trying to pick it apart because I'm one of the people who at the beginning was buying into all of the leftist attacks on him and
yeah,
cried the night he was elected 2016 and was like writing
wow,
essays about how he was a demagogue and stuff.
yeah,
And then now and have come through this long, just, step by step getting to this place of, like seeing him more as just this flawed human, like we talk about MLK.
yes,
This person who's like, I do think he's narcissistic. I do think, there's a lot of things I find wrong with him, but I think he
yeah,
had some great policies, and I think you're right. I think he did, whether it was genuine or not, he did connect with people in that way that Clinton was unable to do, and to make people feel seen. And he
yes,
spoke a lot of truth. He spoke a lot. Right now, people are sort of like, I just want someone who doesn't BS me.
yes,
And
yep,
when he says, "Look, the media has become the enemy of the people," he's right.
yes, 100%. and we're
He's
seeing it
right.
play out. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
And what you don't see, and this is the thing, and I know you know this because of how you operate and listening to you, because you're like, I did a lot. I did a lot of research when I first met you, because I was like, there's no way this lady's this based. I do that with everybody though. I was like, I gotta find out. So like, I watched a lot of interviews that you did and stuff, and listening to you, I was like, this is beyond just like, oh yeah, I just didn't think the right work for me. Like you had a profound transformation in the way that you looked at the world, and I am all for that. I love when people have that, and so I think there's also a difference in that. If you were to ask Hillary to be honest about how she really felt, the answers that she might give you would make you not like her.
Oh yeah. Well, I think, why do you think that is? Because I know why
Yeah,
I
well,
think that is, but
I think that part of it is like, if you asked her, like, well, if you asked her in the same like a question similar to like what you would ask Trump, and he says like, well, I think Hillary's a criminal and should be in jail, she might, if she wasn't able to like filter herself and said what she really honestly felt, she might just go like, well, I wish I could get you killed. Like, I wish I could have you killed for saying this to me. Like, there's an extreme, because here's the thing.
or she'll be phony
Go
as
ahead.
hell when explaining why she's arrived at certain opinions.
Absolutely. But if she could tell the truth, we know that the answer might be actually terrifying. Because here's the thing, if everybody knows that the Clintons have people killed for saying things about them and talking bad about them or whatever, if like or that's a conspiracy that everybody seems to know is like a thing, and then she tells you like how much she likes people, or she pretends to like not be that way. If you know something is true, but the person that you know it to be true about claims the opposite, well, then the issue is that, like, why would you ever support that person? But if you have somebody like Trump who like doesn't care and doesn't feel like he has to filter himself and will tell you what he really thinks about somebody or mock somebody on stage, regardless of whether you agree, you at least know, well, that guy's at least authentic.
I hear what you're saying now. Yes.
Yes.
People, that's what, and when I was a leftist, I couldn't understand what people meant when they said, I like that he just puts it all on the table. It's like, yeah, but a lot of what's on the table is gross.
Yeah.
And now I understand. It's like, well, yeah, because what you're saying, she would never put it all on the table.
No.
She would never. There's a lot of gross stuff there, but you don't know, because she's behind such a mask.
Yes.
And I just wanted to say hi. Look at this.
Hey, well, there he is. Most handsome man on YouTube. My favorite black YouTuber. Drunk
What?
I don't know. It's a running joke, but Jay's awesome. I love Jay. He's great. He's a good dude. Yeah.
Jay. He's the most handsome bear.
Yes, the most handsome bear I've ever seen. Yeah.
On the internet.
Yeah.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Yeah, I think she's I think there are some people who just, we were talking about fame earlier, and comedians and Dave Chappelle being so grounded, and I think so genuine, and I've come to believe maybe that's more rare than I used to think it was, and someone like Clinton, I don't even think you could pull back all the layers to get to. I mean, someone like that, I even doubt, is she genuine at all with anyone ever, with herself, with her husband, with her people in her life. Like, how many you're at a certain point, if everything you're doing is calculated and it's behind a facade, and you're just building on that facade constantly with the choices that you're making, then you're so disconnected from anything that's true that I don't know if she ever has genuine interactions. That might sound like I'm completely throwing her out on the dustbin, but kind of, I'm like,
it's unfortunate, I mean, and I think sometimes the attitude, I think it's good to be able to call out and be honest about people, but like, there's a tragedy to the fact that like a career politician, that we can look at somebody that's done it their whole lives and feel like they don't, like, what do they have to show for it other than like, like, what does a profit a man like to gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Like, you could literally be the most influential politician of all time and then also not be a good person and not be able to ever be your real self and be honest with anybody about things. That's tragedy. Like, what a failure of your life that's where you ended up, I think that's a big part of it too, is, people, authenticity is refreshing in today's day and age, because we know that so many people are inauthentic. We know a lot of these actors and and a lot of these politicians, and I kind of lumped them together because of the way culture has been recently. But the fact is, like, we know that a lot of them are not being real. And then when they finally were real about some things, you got to see how bad it really was. Like, when everybody was locked up in their homes, sitting at home, not like going like, I don't even know where I'm going to get food to eat tomorrow. And then you see some like celebrity posting on Instagram, like, oh, here I am in my mansion and I'm so bored. And I have nothing to do. There's the pool. I've been swimming 6 times today. I don't know what else to do. They look at their tennis court and they're like, oh, I don't want to play tennis again today. And you're like, that's,
they're
and
so disconnected from reality that they have no
Yes.
idea how that's going to come off, right? Like
100%. And so they were finally authentic because they saw everybody else was going through it, and they're like, we're going through it too. And everybody's like, no, you're not. Like, you're in a mansion. Like, if you were just flat out said, listen, like, I'm happy to be where I'm at in the situation I'm at, then I can order groceries and people will wait hand and foot on me. Yay. And I really feel for the people that are struggling right now. You'd get a much better response than going, oh, I'm having such a hard time right now. Sitting in their milk baths crying about, the lockdowns. You're like, what? Yeah.
I can't get any of my maids to come and replenish the milk in the bath.
Yeah. I don't even know how to let this water out.
Yeah. I used to work with one of the comics I worked with who made a joke, which was partially based in truth. And she was like, I don't know how to work my oven. For the first 5 years, I thought it was just a big clock. My maid always does it.
It's a funny joke, though. Yeah.
It's kind of true.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and that's funny because, like, like I said, I knew I was going to reference him again eventually, but Dave Chappelle in one of his specials, he said, he goes, I know that rich white people call poor white people trash behind their backs because I made so much money last year that they invited me to one of their parties. So he was saying, like, listen, I see what they think about you guys. And guess what? Like, I got, hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't really know how to relate to you guys either, but I'm going to be honest with you about how I think and what I see and how I view the world. And that's all I can do. And that's all anybody's ever wanted. Nobody ever asked celebrities to influence culture. All we asked you to do was entertain us. And if you're a weirdo, then be a weirdo. Okay. Like, there's lots of weird people out there, like, that rich or poor, but that's never what we asked of them. But nowadays there's like this moral obligation. Cameron Pasha actually was one of the first people to say this. Go ahead. I wanted to hear.
Oh, well, you're making me think of, and I've talked about this before. I don't agree with the people who say, like, well, celebrities should never offer their opinions at all. That's ridiculous. Everybody, if you feel compelled to speak your mind on something, you should speak it. And if you have a bigger platform, you just have a bigger platform. That's what it is.
Yes.
What bothers me is it's kind of like the sanctimony and the entitlement that their opinion should be taken with more weight and gravitas because they're celebrities. I'm like, no, dude, like, I'll listen to my plumber's opinion and I'll listen to Cher's opinion. My plumber is often more, I'm going to give a little bit more weight to him than Cher.
Yes.
And it has nothing to do with fame. If it did, I would be like, okay, well, I'm going to listen to Cher more. No, it has to do with how grounded are they? How based in reality are they? What kind of points do they make? How do they back it up with argumentation? But a lot of times the Chers of the world, the celebrities, it's sort of like, well, I've reached this level of fame and success in this one area, therefore my opinion must mean more. No.
Yeah, like, that's not how that works. Yeah. 100%. Some of the most base people in the world and some of the most intelligent people in the world are just regular people. I mean, it's funny because, like, I remember Joe Rogan talked about that a lot. Like, one of his mentors, like one of the funniest people he knew, was like a cab driver. And he never did comedy. He just wasn't interested in it. He goes, dude, you are one of the funniest people I've ever met. You got to do this. And he goes, I'm not interested, man. But if you want to do it, go for it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So, but there's absolutely that authenticity. And yeah, I don't think that celebrities shouldn't be able to share their opinions at all. But like you said, it should never be, because you think you're better than people or like people are beholden to you. Like, something that I think is interesting, and I was going to mention this, like, Cameron Pasha did an interview years ago with Geeks and Gamers. It was where I first met him, and I'm a huge fan. I love that guy. I love listening to him talk. Yeah, and one of the things he talked about was with Disney Star Wars. He said that Kathleen Kennedy was on a holy crusade. Like, it was her moral obligation to push, like, shatter the glass ceiling for women, to push women in media and entertainment, to see them represented and to
Mm.
see them like achieve, the next level in entertainment, even though there's not one, but that's how she perceived it. And the what's terrifying is the level of truth and like how visceral that language is, like a holy crusade, that like she's on a path to like wage war against the perceived
Mm.
patriarchy,
Yeah.
to make sure that like women know how powerful and important they are, and to make sure that men know how insignificant they are, because it's not both. It's not let's lift up men and women. It has to be, in crusade, you are against an enemy, and the perceived enemy has to be the patriarchy. The patriarchy is men. And it's also even more terrifying than that. It's not just men, it's boys.
Yeah.
You have to teach little
Yes.
boys now in culture that they are insignificant, that women are better than them and smarter than them, that anytime they want to be in push or independent, that they're mansplaining, that all they do is create problems, all they do is make issues for people, all they do is ruin culture. We would never have any wars if it wasn't for men. We'd never have any issue with politics if it wasn't for men. They have to teach them that, so that way they can continue to push their ideology. And that's the thing. If your ideology comes at the expense of someone else, it's not a good ideology.
Yeah.
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 So
That's how it gets. I completely agree with you, and that's how it operates. Regardless of what they say, because if Kathleen Kennedy heard that, or any of these people who push social justice brand of feminism heard that, they would say, no, men are not the enemy. It's the patriarchy that's the enemy. It's, just like the critical
yeah.
race theory, people say, oh, no, it's not white people that are the enemy. It's whiteness. That's the enemy. And it's, okay, but practically speaking, when you teach this belief system, especially to younger and younger generations, but also adults,
Yeah.
how does it practically work out? It practically works out that you are making groups of people the enemy based on their sex and their race and all these other characteristics.
Yes.
And you're telling them that they are bad and they're part of an oppressor class. And
Yeah.
especially for kids, it affects their psyche. I mean, I've heard so many stories from parents in our community who are like, my kids are coming home and saying to me, like, well, I learned that white people are bad
Yeah.
today. And that's how it gets translated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they try and hide it behind all this. They obscure it behind all this. Like, no, it's really, we're just criticizing the patriarchy and there's no, yeah,
Yeah.
no, I
I'm
see
like,
what you're doing.
who's the patriarchy? Like, you have
Yeah.
to, define what the patriarchy is. It's just it's insipid, because yeah, you're like, no, 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 no. If we create this buzz term of it's the patriarchy, then we can have an enemy to fight against, but not tell you who the real enemy we're fighting against is. And that's the thing. Like you said, with the messaging in entertainment and stuff. Like, I'm like, when I was growing up, there were lead characters in TV shows that were women, and there were sitcoms, and like, dude, I grew up with like Hercules: The Legendary Journeys and Xena Warrior Princess, and they were both awesome. I
Yeah.
loved them. I didn't need like Xena to remind men how stupid they were to be awesome. We just knew Xena was awesome. Like,
Yeah, we grew up with, they're trying to erase all of our pop culture heroes. Like
yes,
Mystery Chris and I talked about this. Like, they're like pretend like Ripley didn't exist,
yes, yep,
or Battlestar Galactica, the remake. It's
yeah,
like that happened. Did that not
yeah,
happen? And they didn't make
yeah,
a big deal of it at the time. Not that I remember, to put female characters in some of those roles, but it's like they act like they're remaking everything and they're these saviors of women in entertainment.
yeah,
We're coming in like Kathleen Kennedy. We're coming in and we're going to give you heroes to identify with.
yes,
I remember growing up. I mean, I had people to identify with: Punky Brewster,
yep,
Anne of Green
yeah,
Gables. There were
yeah,
lots of female characters. They were
yeah,
making shows and movies about these characters. A Little House on the Prairie was one.
yeah, yeah.
And Pee Wee Herman. I didn't have to be a boy to identify with Pee Wee Herman.
Oh, it was just funny. It was hilarious, Yeah, yeah, dude. We had shows like another show I used, Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. Like,
Yes.
that was a show I watched like as a kid, and stuff. I mean, and then growing up with like Star Trek, there were female characters in Star Trek that were part of the main crew that were doing things, and none of it was weird. None of it felt like it needed to tear down men to remind you how
Yeah.
strong women are. It was like, we're both equally strong, and some of us are good in some ways and some of us are good in other ways. It doesn't matter, I mean, but those are the concepts that build a society. The new attitudes and the new mindsets in entertainment don't build societies; they destroy it, and then um, tell you it's all bad and we're going to destroy it, but don't offer any option as to what would come from the destruction.
Hmm.
It's something that I actually have a belief in, even in like religion and stuff like that. Is like, yeah, it is good to want to see. It's good to have standards. It's good to know what sin is. It's good to have a standard in Jesus that we look at and we go, that's what I should be living towards. But if my whole life is built around destroying sin, what have I built? And Jesus told us to build a kingdom. He said, the kingdom of God is like here, not, okay, well, destroy the enemy and destroy everything around you, and then you can build the kingdom. He said it's here now. Like,
Yeah.
and it's that same kind of attitude, is like being able to say, like, hey, if you're constantly fighting against an enemy, what happens when the enemy isn't around anymore? What do you do then? What are you building? What are you building for the future? What'll be left of the future if everything is torn down, the patriarchy is eradicated, and racism is eradicated, but there's no ending to it? Because if you build your whole life and systems and business model around fighting something, when there's nothing to fight, your entire infrastructure falls apart.
This is so important. And this is also why I think, because so much of woke is about destroying.
Yeah.
It took me a while to realize that when I was coming out of it, is so much is about destroying, tearing other people down, being envious and resentful of other people's success, defeat, that fighting. It's all about fighting something. The whole belief system is based around fighting something, at least in the way they sell it.
Yeah.
And the thing with being, anti-woke or based, whatever you want to call this whole very diverse group of people who are wrong thinkers and are not falling in with woke, right? The thing about that is there's a danger that I recognized early where I was like, I don't want my whole being. I think it's really important to expose what my old belief system was. What is social justice and what are the lies that it tells you? What's it really about?
Yeah.
But I can't have my whole being be like, what is my meaning and purpose? To fight social justice, because then it's just the same thing. You're just fighting and you're tearing down, and then you're tearing down something. I think it's very good to tear it down. I think that's a good thing to tear down. But we have to balance our lives. If you want to fight wokeness, it's you and I kind of talked about this briefly beforehand. And when I do these hangout shows on Mondays and Fridays, kind of like just relax and breathe and just talk about. We don't even have to talk about what's in the news. We can talk about what's going on in our lives, because life is about so much more than fighting even an evil ideology.
Yes.
It's about what are you building, creating, your family, your faith. What's your job? What are you working on? What are you making? What are you adding, Mike? I know you're adding a lot.
Well, trying to. Yeah. Definitely trying to, but that's always a big thing too, is that, I whatever platform I'm in and whatever situation I'm working on, I just want to be able to, like, my big thing, I've always said this, is I just want to be able to, like, give people hope. It's important. I think hope is really important. It's why like superheroes resonate so deeply with people, because the idea that somebody is fighting for you, fighting against fighting the battles you can't fight, but they're doing it for you, not for some other reason, is important. It's why Christianity resonates, with people that get it, that somebody stepped in and said, hey, like, this is like an unwinnable battle, but I can win this battle for you. And then you can live a better life because of it. Like, somebody sacrificing their life for you, knowing that, like, that they're putting everything on the line for you so that you can grow and be better, is like huge, and I think that that's part of it. Like, it's really important to me that, whatever stories I tell, whatever stories Epic Verse tells and stuff, gives people entertainment. Yes, because I want people to have entertainment, but also at the end of the day, like, it should be about, like, walking away going, like, cool, there's, like, hope here. Like, there's hope for a better tomorrow. Like, Star Trek is popular because it gives people a hope for a better tomorrow. Lord of the Rings is popular because at the end of the day, like, they defeated the big evil guy, but, like, then everybody went home and they got to go live their lives and be happy. Sam got to marry he got the girl at the end and had
Mhm.
kids, and he was happy. And even the people that were damaged, like Frodo and stuff, they got to go off into the sunset and be in a better place where they didn't have to have that pain anymore. There's like a beauty to that kind of idea and in that kind of storytelling that I think is very much a lost art form, because we got into nihilism, and I think combating nihilism is important. But the problem with battling nihilism is if you're not doing it with other people around you, and you're not doing it for the right reasons, you'll get consumed by it.
Yes. Yes. That's what
Yeah.
that whole Nietzsche quote's about. You become the monster you fight. You stare
Yes.
into the abyss too long.
The
You
abyss
become the
stares.
abyss. The abyss
Yeah.
stares at you. Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly, I think that's a big warning.
Yeah.
It's a big warning about it. About,
Uh,
can I ask you, I've already had you an hour and a half. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
I will tell you this: you can have all the time that you want. I didn't know how long your show went, and I just know how long I can talk. So
Okay.
you're good. So
Cool. Okay, good. Well, I have to go probably in about half an hour because I got
okay.
my furniture making job today. I'm excited.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Listen,
learning. Can I tell
that's a lot
you?
of work. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. The second, third time I was there, I didn't think he was going to let me use the saw so quickly. I
Yeah.
used the drill press, I used the saw and the grinder. I cut metal bars with the saw, sparks flying,
Oh
took the
yeah.
drill press, and also recognized how out of shape I am because the drill press
Yeah, that's a lot
really.
of work. Yeah.
And then grinded it all down to get rid of the sharp edges and spray painted all these bars which go under the tables. It was so much fun.
That's awesome.
And yeah, I'm like, I wanna learn as much as I can, and now I have to get in better shape so I can do this.
Oh
But,
yeah.
anyway, that's an aside. So I wanna ask you, I wanna get to something fun. You mentioned that you got really into conspiracy theories for a while.
Oh yeah.
Can
Oh
you
yeah.
tell me what's a conspiracy theory that you were really interested in that ended up being true? And what's one that you no longer think there's any validity
Okay. That's a really good question.
to?
One that I found to be true.
Or something that gets called conspiracy theory or has been called conspiracy theory. For example, I'll give you one of
Yeah.
mine. At the beginning of the pandemic, they were all like, all the mainstream media is like, don't talk about the origins of the virus. We
Yeah.
know, we know it came from wet market. Like no way it came from a lab. The Lancet letter put
Yeah.
out this bogus thing that they got people to sign saying there's no way it came from a lab, guys, and
Never.
we don't have any conflict of interest, which a lot of them did. Now
Yeah.
they say, well, now the mainstream media is like, well, it's very likely it came from a lab. So is there something like that has been called conspiracy theory that you think is now like, guys, this come on.
Yeah. Well, okay. So this would be a fun one, because some of the ones I'm thinking of right now are pretty deep, and I don't know that I should talk about them on this stream, because they could
Okay.
get pretty crazy. But one of the ones, okay, this is one I find really funny. Okay, because this is a meme, but like Alex Jones used to talk a lot about they're turning the frogs gay. Like that was like a meme for him. He was like screaming
Right.
on his show about turning the frogs gay, and I remember going like, dude, this guy's nuts. I remember that, and I remember reading about it. I was like, what is this whole deal with the frogs turning gay thing? I remember reading about it and like the scientific dissertation that like an actual scientist gave about how this like chemical in the water was making these frogs like change. I mean, frogs naturally do change genders in nature at times. If there's not like, if it's all males, one will
Mhm.
become a female or vice versa. But like it was causing involuntary gender change, and then they were also mating with each other because of the confusion that it was causing with like the chemicals changing their genders because it wasn't supposed to. And I was
Right.
like, so the funny part about it is they're turning the frogs gay, but he wasn't wrong. And I was like, it was like mind blowing. I was like, he was telling the truth. He
It's
just said it
a
in the worst way possible.
Yeah,
Like,
I just looked it up. It's a pesticide. It's
yeah,
atrazine. I mean,
yeah,
he was right.
he was right. That's what's crazy. I was like, oh my gosh, he was right. He wasn't lying, but he just said it in like the goofiest way possible, so people will dismiss it. But if you're hungry for knowledge, you'll look it up to you'll either look it up to discredit him, trying to find the truth, or you'll look it up to see if he was right. And you should do both. If you want to discredit him, you got to research it, and if you want to prove him right, you got to research it. And he was right. So there's
They
not
are
really any,
guys,
yeah.
they are turning the frogs gay.
They're turning
Um,
the frogs gay. Yeah.
can I ask
Um.
you before you give me and then you're gonna give me one that you think there's no more credence in. But
Yeah.
I missed this. Thank you, Waffle. I'm pulling it up right now. Waffle gave a super chat. Uh,
Oh,
60.
nice.
What is that?
I have
Computer
no idea.
computer money.
Yeah, computer money.
Wokeism is walking in the footsteps of the Nazis. Don't believe me? Think I'm exaggerating? Go make a quick read how the Holocaust started. It started with dehumanizing certain groups of people, blaming them for everything else.
Yeah.
There's no question there. I thought there was a question there, but I do agree with you, Waffle. That's very similar. And now I'm going to be accused of talking about the Holocaust too often, which somebody accused me of on Friday. I'm like, really? I don't actually talk about it that often, but
Oof. Well, I
it's
mean,
a historical event. The thing
yeah.
is, we should learn from history. We should talk about history, and we should try and be able to have our eyes open, right? To see, like, are we repeating
Yes.
things? It doesn't
Yes.
mean we're saying this thing is exactly like this thing. It's saying, are there some warning signs here of human behavior that we've seen before of the
Yes.
behavior, right? Like,
Yep. 100%, because you have to ask those questions so that you don't end up in the same place that you were before, you know? And I think that that's something that, it's funny how people on the left will use that a lot. They've called a lot of people Nazis. I've been called a Nazi sympathizer. I've been called, I've been told I have internalized racism, all the things that you can throw at somebody because they don't fit the box, check the box that you think that they should check. But yeah, because they can't call me a Nazi because I wouldn't be a Nazi. I'd be targeted by the Nazis, but they could say I'm a sympathizer of them. But the idea is if I use the language to discredit you, it's okay. But if you use the language to draw parallels to what's happening in society, you're wrong because that's ridiculous that we'd never get back to that point again. That's the difference, and that's why it's dangerous, because the idea is to look at it and go, what are we doing that's similar to how they did things here? Because the thing is, if you're constantly, if you blame one group of people for all the problems and evils of the world, well, like, you're calling some I really respect Ripa for this, because he's talked about this before. He's went after a couple people for it and stuff. But I'm like, when you call somebody a Nazi, you're literally saying that they are equivalent to some of the most reprehensible evil human beings in history.
yeah.
Not just in recent history, in history. Like, go, so for people, I'm sure a lot of people that are watching the show have read about it, but like, I've done research on listening to the accounts that soldiers had of what happened in war. And this is something that's really crazy. And I'm pretty sure this is true. I read it in a couple different spots. But what I read was that the soldiers from in America that went over to overseas to fight in World War II, that not a single one of them was ever tried for a war crime, because what they saw over there was so terrifying and heartbreaking and like psychologically damaging that they were not held responsible. They couldn't be held responsible for their actions because of some of the things that they saw. And I remember reading stories about some of their experiences and some of people's firsthand accounts of what they saw when they got over there. And they're like, there is perceived evil. Trump is evil. He's the enemy. He's the worst person that's ever existed in the history of mankind. And then there's real evil when you go over and you find a boxcar full of bodies,
Yeah.
filled to the brim, and not just one, but like 50 boxcars filled to the very top, stacked with bodies, because they were Jews and no other reason. That's evil. That's actual legitimate evil, and that's why it's not a small thing to call somebody something like that. And that's why it's important, and just like we talked about with swearing, it's important that words remain reverent, because if you throw around the word Nazi all the time, the word has no meaning anymore.
Yes. And you're right. You're pointing out, I mean, something that's very important is they set rules for others that don't apply to themselves.
Yes.
They've been talking about the Holocaust and Nazis ever since Trump first started running. Actually, I remember back when I say we because I was super woke leftist then, we were using those same comparisons about W, which now seems ridiculous because now the left has embraced W,
Yeah.
and whoever runs on the Republican ticket, coming up, if it's DeSantis, whoever it is, Now they're going to reset. They're going to say, well, we said that about Trump, but now it's really true about DeSantis. Like, they're going to do it every
Yes.
time. And they're not just saying, let's look at human behavior and recognize the warning signs that lead up to certain things.
No.
Like we're trying to do. They're saying, no, you are a Nazi. You are a, like, they're going to this crazy place
Yes.
it's amazing what they're able to get away with. Well, it's like narcissistic psychopathic behavior of like accusing you of what they're doing, and
and then completely deflecting when you do.
Yeah.
When you call it out for it. Yep, absolutely.
I do have a question for you. I thought there was a question in here. Ken Lifson for $5. Hi, Ken.
Hey, what's up, Ken?
Ken, I just saw the watercolor you made of me again recently. I was clearing some photos off my phone. I love it. Anyway,
that's awesome.
Almost sounds like Mike is a libertarian. How much does he agree with Ripa's outlook on the world?
So I guess, yeah, you could describe me as a libertarian. That word once again has a lot of buzz because a lot of people got really heavy into libertarianism recently, and they were like, "Oh man, everybody's a libertarian." And what you found is like some people were just conservatives that like just didn't want to be aligned with other conservatives, and it's like, okay, well, it's a spectrum. It's not a everybody agrees with one thing. But yeah, I probably lean a lot more libertarian. I don't talk about my politics a lot because some of the things that I have are controversial, and I don't exist. I wouldn't ever call myself conservative. Like, I lean conservative in some things. I lean liberal in other things too. And there's a blend of things, and I feel strongly about some issues and stuff like that. But I don't know all of Ripa's politics. You know, I know Ripa. He's a good dude. I would say we're buddies. You know, I've never spent any time with him outside of just being on live streams and stuff with him, but I support him. He's a good dude, like character wise. His wife is wonderful. And what I do know about his politics, I agree with some of it, you know. We probably disagree with other things, you know, but I don't know. I've never had a like real sit down talk about what are our policies and what are our politics and stuff. But I would probably say we align with, you know, probably more things than we don't align with. You know, so yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then $5 from
what's up, Cthulhu?
Cthulhu. Says that's the point. They're trying to dehumanize us. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what that whole thing about Ben Shapiro's presence being harmful was about. It's, you know, they want to get to the point where it's considered socially acceptable to say that some people like Ben Shapiro, who's just a middle of the road conservative Jewish person, that he's not allowed to even be present in places. That's dehumanizing.
Absolutely. Or same with like Jordan Peterson, and they're like, I'm like, he's not even American. He's Canadian. Like, so he's not even from here. But, you know, or, you know, I don't know if like my buddy Disparu, who's, you know, killing it right now. He's from the UK. But he's been called a Trump supporter, and they're like, "Oh, you're just a racist Trump supporter." He's like,
they don't know what else to say. That's just like the go-to now. Yeah. Big Raj, thank you for the super sticker, sir. And Brentley is here from Dangerous Rhetoric. He says, "I prefer classical liberal myself."
There you go.
Yeah, I use that a lot to describe if I have to describe my beliefs. Classical liberal.
I like I said, I've loved listening until you talk about stuff because I'm just like, dude, I totally agree, and that's awesome. And yeah, I think that the best thing we can do as our community is be able to agree on the things that matter and align with each other because our values are similar, and not need to agree on everything. Because that's what trying to agree on everything is what made the church split into like 150 denominations.
Yeah.
And that's not how it's supposed to function.
You made me think of a verse earlier when you mentioned the verse about everything's permissible, but not everything is edifying.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another verse, and I looked it up because I'm still trying. I'm not that great at quoting things in memory, but it was this verse from Romans where it says, "As for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him, but not to quarrel over opinions. One person believes he may eat anything, while the weak person eats only vegetables. Let not the one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats. For God has welcomed him. Who are you to pass judgment on the servant of another?" And that goes on, but I think that's sort of about like the when you get to the realm of opinions.
Yes.
About like, well, you know, should you be eating pork or not, or what? Like that's
Yeah.
At that
What
point,
day
I'm
is the
like,
best day to go to church? Yeah.
exactly. Or can you have wine or not? Right? Like,
Yeah.
look, I can't. I cannot. I
No.
must abstain. Yeah, but
Gotcha.
yeah, I'm an alcoholic. But I'm not going to pass judgment on the person who can drink
Yeah.
and be like, oh, they had drink a little too much to be godly. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
no, who am I to say? I don't know how much
Yeah.
they can drink. I
Yeah.
know how much I can. None. Like,
None. There you go.
so that's
But
it.
that's exactly like that's a beautiful way of looking at it, because like that's the thing, some people abstain. Like I don't drink alcohol. I've never done drugs or anything like that. I'm pretty straight laced about stuff, but it's a personal value. But then when I get around other people and they're like, "Are you cool if I drink?" I'm like, "Of course."
Yeah.
Like that's completely up to you. But we do this thing, and religion does this thing a lot too. It creates an entitlement to morality that we were never supposed to have, because Jesus is supposed to be the moral compass, not us.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're supposed to look at him, and Jesus was said to be a friend of like wine bibbers and tax collectors. And I didn't see once in the Bible where he was like, "Bro, you got to stop this drinking because like drinking wine is bad." What he did talk a lot about was like, "Hey, if you have a hole in your life that you're struggling to fill, I absolutely have the answer to that. Like if you're thirsty, I have water that you can drink from that will actually satisfy you." But like the answer was providing somebody a better alternative than what they had presented to them,
Yeah.
not to tear them down and go figure it out after I leave. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree. And I can't remember it right now, but there are verses in there about when drinking does become a problem,
yes,
like
yep,
to excess, and it's like that
yeah,
makes sense.
yep,
That it's talking about like for some people it will not be something they can do.
yes,
Um,
absolutely.
Waffle says, just for the
Apparently, those are
record,
shekels, by the way.
I saw that they always correct me that it's shekels. You know what it is? I used to think shekels was like moolah. I didn't think it was a real kind of money.
Oh, that's funny. That's really funny.
That's so ignorant, but I'm not embarrassed to say it.
Yeah,
Like, like Steve Martin would be like, "Give me some of your moolah."
yeah,
Like, not really. Okay.
that's really funny.
For the record, I wasn't calling woke people Nazis. Oh, I know that. I know you weren't. Don't
Yeah,
worry. Just that there are unfortunately many parallels between those two groups. Greetings from Israel. Greetings,
yeah,
Waffle. Thanks for the shekels
absolutely. That's
and the
awesome.
moolah.
Yeah. I had some I've always wanted to visit Israel. I think it's such a gorgeous country. But yeah. So that's really
Yeah.
funny, but
I would love to visit. Can I tell you? I'm so excited. So I'm going to, speaking of two countries that I've never been to, I'm going to Switzerland and Germany, in a week. My
that's
husband's there
awesome.
doing shows. Yeah, and I get to go for
Yeah.
the last week. And
That's so cool.
yeah, I'm trying to get a lot done before then. My list is crazy of things to do.
Oh yeah, I'm
But
sure.
once I get there, I mean, I've been seeing pictures that he's taking, and they're all the beautiful scenery, and I'm like, well, Tiger and I are having a ball watching Inside the Mind of a Cat on Netflix. So it's not just you
That's
having fun, dude.
yeah, you're not the only one having a good time over there looking at those beautiful mountains and all that cool stuff. Yeah. Have you ever been overseas before?
I
Like
have, but I've never been to Switzerland or Germany.
gotcha.
Yeah, so
That'll
I'm
be
very,
so cool. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
That's awesome.
I'm
Yeah.
getting really excited. So,
Yeah.
um, okay, I got distracted. What were you saying? I do need to wrap it up. Can I
Yes.
can I play something for you and get your opinion
Absolutely.
and the opinion of the chat? Thank you, by the way, if you're hanging out with us today.
Yes.
Keri Smith here on Deprogrammed with Epic Mike. You can find links to Epic Verse below in the description. So I did an ad, and I'm not great at editing. And I want to just play the rough draft for you guys and tell me what you think. And truly be honest. Here we go. This is my first advertisement that I've done for a channel sponsor. Woohoo! It's exciting. Church on the Square has actually changed my life. I happened to go at the very first meeting by chance because I saw an ad on Facebook, and I got there the very first service and I knew I had found my home because it was just this was a sermon that was feeding my brain and my soul. Our pastor is Bradley J. Helgerson. He is brilliant. I describe him to people as like a mix between Jordan Peterson and C.S. Lewis. He's always bringing in outside references in addition to scripture. Everything is founded in scripture, and then he'll relate it to the world. You can find them on YouTube at the Church on the Square. The logo's up in the right-hand corner, wherever that is. You can also find them online at thechurchonthesquare.org. And on that site, you can find links to all the social media pages, including YouTube and Facebook. We are still on Facebook. We're just no longer allowed to advertise there. If you are in the Georgetown, Texas area, you're welcome to visit with us any Sunday. We meet on Sundays at 10 a.m. right on the Georgetown Square in front of the courthouse. We meet outside like old-fashioned church. You don't have to wear hats. I wore this one for the video so you could see what fun you could have. If it's hot or if it's raining, we meet inside Ken's Guitars right on the Georgetown Square. That's KENZ Guitars. And I hope to see you there. Let's play some more of that music. What do you think?
That was adorable. I mean,
Okay,
that was. It's long for an ad.
It's too long. I need to cut that like a minute.
Yeah, but like I will say this for you because this part of the reason I was really excited to come on the show. You are in your element the best when you're just being authentically you. And that is the reason that like I was drawn to you. Like I remember when you were on Tuesday night's main event, I was like, holy cow, dude, this like Keri is so awesome. So like anytime you're just being you, like it sells. You being authentic. And when you were talking about like how fun it is and like why you like it and appreciate it and approach it, it works. It sells it. Yeah. You know, I think that's something that's missing from churches is the authentic expression of their members. So like being excited about the hats and being excited, you know, like
I know I don't want to lose the part about the hats.
No, I would keep the part about the hats.
Okay, yeah. But I gotta squeeze them out. Oh, that's gross. I gotta cut some out. I think yeah, anyway, I think I need to redo the bit about the YouTube. And but the thing is, our church, and I don't know if I got this across in the ad, but the way I found them was through a Facebook ad. And the way that one of my friends who still goes found them is through a Facebook ad. And now they can't even advertise on Facebook, and they don't even have a reason why. They just told them you violate community standards.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, I have to do a good ad, like make it good. And I tried reading some copy and stuff, and that didn't work well. So I just
no. Like, I think what I would do is
cut the hat talk. What?
No, the hat talk is the best part. No, what I would do is I would keep the edit that you have. What I would do is I would start it and I'd give yourself a timer, say, okay, the ad's going to only be this long. And then what I would do is I would edit the music in post with editing, because you can do that. You can add it in. And what I would literally do is I would just talk in one take and say the exact same things kind of that you said, but in one take.
Yeah, because I really cut that up a lot.
Yeah, and I think that would smooth it out. But also, once again, you authentically just describing what you like and you know what's going on with the church and everything is what will make people like appreciate it. You know.
Yeah. Cool. So, thank you. Absolutely. Thank you guys for letting me test that.
Yeah, but we can't cut the hat talk. The hat talk is
the hat talk. I wore the hat for the ad so I could talk about it.
I do have to say, AH said I'm not as lame as he thought I was, and I really appreciate that.
What?
Thanks.
AH is just says what he thinks. Cut the hat.
Yeah.
Is AH my aunt?
I don't know, but I mean, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to. Can I ask you? Will you come back and hang out with us again?
Anytime you want me to. Yeah. If I have the time to do it, I love jumping on and just talking and hanging out with people, and I love the discussions you have on your channel. Like, you know, I think you deserve far more views and far more subscribers than you even have. But you're on the up. You're moving up, and I think that's because it's well deserved. So
thanks,
yeah, anytime you want to have me back, I'd love to be back. You guys' audience was great. The chat's been awesome. So yeah,
Love this
Absolutely.
guy. Yeah, so usually Mondays and Fridays we do a kerfuffle break and it's more about topical and we jump around. But since it was your first time here, I was like, no, let's make this a deprogrammed interview and I'm gonna put it in the deprogram
I really
part of the
appreciate that.
site
Yeah,
and but next time I would love for you to come hang out and let's talk about what's going on in the world now that people know who you
absolutely.
are and everything. So
Yeah,
cool.
that's awesome.
Just remind people where they can find you.
Yeah, right now the main place you can find me is Twitch. I know a lot of people don't watch Twitch. I do gaming streams on there. I've been getting a little bit more like talking about stuff, doing movie reviews and show reviews and stuff on there. That's twitch.tv/the_epic_Mike. You can find me on Twitter on the_epic_Mike. Find me later today on Geeks and Gamers Tabletop, Secrets of the Frost Maiden. I'm everywhere. Every Mondays and Tuesdays, the Epic Verse podcast. You can catch me there as well. I'm kind of bouncing around on everything. And then probably later this week, I've been saying it for a while. I'm just gonna pull the trigger on starting my YouTube channel because I keep getting told I need to have a place to talk. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. You
so
need to do
we're gonna do
that.
that. Yeah,
Cool. Will
absolutely.
you ever have Mrs. Epic on?
Maybe if she's willing to. No, she does. We have a couple ideas for some videos I'd like to do. And she's awesome. It'll just be immediately. I know everybody will see how how high I punched up to marry her. I married way up. I was very lucky in that. So that'll be part of it. But yeah, no, I would definitely love to have her on screen eventually because she makes me look good. So yeah,
Cool.
and she's awesome. Yeah,
Well, thank you. Have a good week. Thank
yeah.
you guys for
Thank
hanging
you.
out with us. If you like the show, please hit like and subscribe. And if you want to support us financially, I do have a Subscribe Star, Locals, and Patreon where you can do that.
Awesome.
I think that's it. Gonna hit the video. Bye, Mike.
Nice to see you.